Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Human Resources for Startups 101 with Gusto and Early Growth Financial Services, presented by Early Growth Financial Services and Gusto. My name is Patty Montoya and I'll be your moderator today from the Early Growth team. I have a few quick notes before we get started. The webinar will last about an hour and that includes time at the end for questions, so feel free to type your questions into the control panel and we'll answer them in between slides and after the presentation is over. The next thing to note is that this webinar will be recorded and sent to all registrants within the slide deck within 48 hours. You can also find the recording and all of our recordings on our YouTube channel, Early Growth. Now, before I pass this off to our speakers today, I'd like to tell you a bit about Early Growth Financial Services. This is a quote from our founder, David Ehrenberg, and a few of the clients we've worked with. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists, Caleb Nyquist from Gusto and Sir Grow from Early Growth, who will tell us a bit about themselves and kick off today's discussion. Sir?
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for spending part of your afternoon with us. I know how busy you guys are, and we really appreciate you taking time, and hopefully this presentation will be useful to you. As Patty mentioned, my name is Sir Grow. I'm a consulting CFO with Early Growth Financial Services. I've been working with the company now for 6 years, where I have helped and assisted many startups, mostly in the tech space, but also in the consumer product space as well, and assisting them with their kind of higher level financial consulting needs. And prior to Early Growth, I had several roles as CFO, VP of Finance, Director of Finance at smaller startups here in the Bay Area, as well as bigger tech companies as well.
Caleb?
Hi, thanks. It's great to be here. My name is Caleb Nyquist. I'm the editor at large at Gusto, and I'm part of the content team. And we talk about various subjects that are related to small businesses, and specifically in the payroll, benefits, and HR space. And here's a little bit more information about Gusto if you're not familiar with us. We offer full service payroll, automatically filing payroll taxes to help you stay compliant. And it's a platform that's very easy to use, and our pricing is very transparent. We also offer straightforward benefits that our modern, intuitive software and team of licensed advisors help small businesses navigate the questions around benefits with confidence. And we also offer expert HR tools and support built for the modern small business.
So just a bit of housekeeping. We have muted all of our attendees. You can send us the questions through the Q&A, and we will send you the recording later today or tomorrow. This is today's agenda, and we are going to start with a poll. So you can reply through the poll that just started, and we'll show you the attendees later today. So here are the results. You can see them, and then we're going to continue with the presentation.
So those are some interesting results. I see a lot of people that are, they are the HR person in their company. I mean, Sir, what is, in your experience when dealing with small businesses, I mean, what have you seen as typical? Like, is an HR professional something that a lot of businesses kind of put off as long as they can?
Yeah, that's exactly the case. And depending on the size of the companies that the respondents here are representing, it wouldn't surprise me at all to find that when 5 people said that that would be me, that they're not true HR professionals, but maybe they're handling some of the HR responsibilities. Because obviously at small companies we all wear multiple hats. But yeah, you're right, Caleb. In most cases, what we find is that at an early stage, companies are HR is not an area that is staffed internally, and that most companies, at least until they get to a certain point, number of employees and what have you, that they will use outside resources such as Gusto and others to handle most or if not all of their HR functions.
Yeah, so I guess the first portion of this webinar is to talk about why HR, and I think the first point is right on the screen in front of you. It says that HR is not just for big businesses. So as Cirque mentioned, is if many of you find that you are wearing that HR hat from time to time, you understand that it isn't just for big businesses. There's lots of critical HR functions that are really important for small business success. And I think when most people, and if you don't wear that particular hat or you don't really have a person dedicated to HR, you probably think of HR as kind of a big business function. And you think, that HR people are these kind of rah-rah types who say things like, people are our greatest assets, or we take every complaint seriously. That's kind of what I think of when I think about HR. But in a small business context, it can be really important as well. So for those small businesses that do have a semblance of an HR function, it is most likely a person who wears a lot of hats and needs all the help they can get because they have other responsibilities too. So HR functions like hiring, benefits, payroll management, and compliance are crucial for any business, and including small businesses, to be successful. And if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. If you and some co-founders have this great idea and you're getting to work on it, and you end up raising a little money or secure some other kind of financing, you'll find that you need to hire employees to start building your business. And all those functions that I just mentioned, hiring, benefits, and the rest of them, all of a sudden those become really critical. And if you can't run payroll on time and you can't offer benefits, or you can't stay compliant with all the elements of those things, you won't have employees for very long. And so that's really crucial. That's why it makes HR really crucial for every business, no matter the size. Next slide, please. One other reason that HR is really important is employee engagement. And I think, again, this might seem like an aspect that would be primarily the focus of big companies, but I think it really can be relevant for any size company to focus and execute some employee engagement efforts. And the reason that is employees that are engaged are happier and more productive. And what that usually translates into, in a lot of cases, is a return on investment that you might not be expecting. And there's actually a very interesting study just a few years ago by a marketing intelligence company called Aberdeen. And they found that, quote, companies with a formal engagement strategy in place are 67% more likely to improve their revenue on a year-over-year basis. So not only are you getting happier employees, but those happier employees end up being more productive. And that's regardless of size. And that increased productivity, you're going to see those results in your business. Cirque, is this second question is any thoughts on employee engagement?
Sure. Yeah. You know, we got another poll up here. If you guys wouldn't mind just going ahead and replying to this as well, so we just kind of have an idea of where you guys think you are. So thank you very much, and I think this is where, you know, most people will usually come out, right? Which is that we're doing the best that we can in most cases. You know, we may or may not know a lot about HR ourselves, but obviously we're doing the best that we can. To the extent that you know that it's non-existent, obviously this presentation will be a good lead-in for you guys as well. So thank you very much for your replies. You know, I guess, you know, from my perspective, you know, what we want to do is just to make sure that everyone realizes the importance of HR. There's lots of functions, which we'll talk about some of those functions. But to Kayla's point, I really, really want to reiterate this, is that, you know, employee well-being, employees are our most important asset, right? As a CFO, I always, you know, tell my clients that, you know, for most early stage companies, the two most important things that they need to be focused on, and when I say they, I mean the founders of the team, the management of the team, the two things that they need to focus all of their attention on are product development and customer acquisitions, right? Those are the two key things from a business perspective that is going to be critical to our success, right? But obviously, none of that happens without employee engagement. And so to the extent that you can have a well-engaged employee team and the processes that underlie you know, your efforts to make sure that happens, and to you know, maximize the probability that that's going to happen, you're setting yourself for success. And that's kind of where HR really, really comes into play, because, you know, it's an area where, you know, you can not spend a lot of attention or not pay a lot of attention, and things will fall through the cracks. And all of a sudden we start seeing negative results on the back end. Whereas if we have a really well-tuned machine on that side, communicating properly, offering the right packages with regards to payroll and benefits and all those other things, then I think you're going to have a well-engaged employee force, which is going to maximize your efforts and your revenue and your performance of the company. So Pat, if you could move to the next slide, maybe Caleb could talk a little bit about some of the functions.
Yeah, so here's a handful of HR functions that we're going to talk about. And I think everybody is probably pretty familiar with these, but I'll just talk about each one of them briefly. And I'll start with payroll right at the top there. Payroll, of course, covers everything from taxes to overtime, but also includes things like raises, withholding, whether that's taxes or withholding for, to pay insurance premiums. All those things wrap into payroll. Next, we have benefits. I think when most people think about benefits, they think about healthcare, but there's also retirement, family leave, and many more things. Benefits is a really big bucket, and there's a lot of different ways that you can be strategic here, because benefits is a really crucial portion of any offering, well, any offer that you make to employees. So being strategic, especially in a competitive job market like we have now, the benefits package is almost, I would say, in a lot of cases, it can be more important than the actual salary that you're offering. And speaking of offers, number 3 on this list is hiring. And so finding and retaining talent, and including things like offer letters and onboarding as part of the hiring process. This ensures that you are finding the people, going through the process, you're being compliant while you're going through that process. And then when they begin work, when they've decided to join your organization, they begin work at the onboarding process. That's a really good opportunity for you to educate any new employees about your company. Next, management. So things like assessing performance. This can involve learning and development, workplace policies, and communication is obviously a big piece of the management portion of HR. And finally, compliance. I think compliance is kind of just the foundation to all of these things. There is a component, a compliance component to all of these things, like, did you remit payroll taxes? Is your business subject to federal and state unemployment? Are you required to offer health insurance under the Affordable Care Act? Things like that. And that's a lot of work, but it's also a very crucial aspect of the HR function.
Great, thanks, Caleb. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into some of these issues. We'll start with payroll. As obviously payroll is really, really important, right? And there's some things that we need to do correctly. There are some things that we'd like to do. But let me just kind of start by saying one thing, which is that I've been in situations where companies are reluctant to have an outside company handle payroll. And to me, that's probably a very, very strong sign that you're making a mistake early on, because payroll, first of all, the cost of having someone like Gusto do payroll is really, really tiny. I mean, you can look online to see what it would cost, but the idea that we could do this ourselves as opposed to having a professional such as Gusto handle it is to me really, really short-sighted, right? There's lots of problem areas that we can get into by trying to do this ourselves. We may forget to file our quarterly reports. We may forget to remit, the withholdings. We may be withholding the wrong amounts. All of those things can cause us big problems. And as I mentioned kind of at the outset, if we're really, really focusing our efforts as entrepreneurs and as managers of the company on customer acquisitions and product development, then any time that you're spending on doing things like this, or having employees do things like this, to me is really being penny wise and pound foolish. So let me just kind of start off by just saying that payroll is something that you should absolutely. I don't know of any company or at any size where it makes sense for them to be doing them themselves instead of having a company like Gusto handle it on their part.
Hey, Cirque, if I was just thinking, there is kind of I don't know the exact stat, but maybe you know it off the top of your head, but there is a large number of businesses that are still doing some of these critical functions like payroll manually. And I think that's kind of, like you say, talking about penny wise and a pound short, it is something that is kind of pervasive through small businesses in relying on manual processes. And the consequences of making mistakes in these areas can be severe.
Yep.
Can you speak a little bit more to that, or do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I don't know what percentage of small companies out there are doing it themselves. The work that we do with early growth is typically with companies that are being funded, externally by VCs, angel investors, what have you, and in most of it, I'd say 100% of the cases of our clients, we do use a payroll service firm like Gusto, but I know that a lot of mom and pop shops kind of do this on their own, and even for them, what I would suggest is if you're in that group where you're kind of doing payroll on your own and you don't really see the benefit, or you think it's going to be too costly to do it, to have someone like us to manage it, I would highly encourage you to do a little bit of research, look on the Gusto site, see what it's going to cost you, and think about what level of effort it's taking either you or someone on your staff to do this, and to manage the headaches and the stress that comes with being compliant and making sure that taxes are being filed and paid on a timely basis. If there's one thing that I know that no one wants to see is an envelope from the IRS, right? That's always bad news, and in more cases than than not, if you're kind of doing payroll on your own, there are going to be times it's going to get something's going to just kind of fall through the cracks, and the stress and the time involved in trying to clear up a matter with IRS. Trust me when I tell you that it's not worth it in 99.99% of the cases. There may be one of those outliers where, okay, maybe for them with one employee or something like that, it just doesn't make sense. But I think in virtually all cases, you're going to want to have a professional do it. Especially if you're a little bit bigger, or you're planning on hiring salespeople in different parts of the country, and we're gonna be filing in different states and what have you. Then obviously at that point, it's a no-brainer. But even before then, I think in most cases you're gonna want to do this. And the payroll is also another thing where we keep on talking about employees, right, and the importance of employees. But it's things like the perception, right, is managing perception of employees. And we'll talk a little bit about the hiring process a little bit later, but I know we've all kind of been there when we start a new job and we get either really, really good vibes or we get bad vibes, even on day one, right? Things are either running really, really smoothly, they're ready for us as hires, they've already got all of our employee information, they got all the forms that we need to sign, and as soon as we sign it, that gets uploaded into the payroll system. On day one, when we're supposed to get paid, or when the first payroll comes up, that we get paid on a timely basis, taxes are withheld, the direct deposit happens automatically. All of those are things that happen through a payroll system that gives employees, especially new employees as well as longstanding employees, peace of mind that the company is being run smoothly. And that matters a lot, especially given that in most cases, the payroll is going to represent a significant, if not a majority, of our costs. At least for the companies that we work with, that's the case. Unless you're a company that that spends all of its or a lot of money just on inventory, for example, I think you'll find that people-related costs tend to be the most expensive, and so we want to get that part right. Okay, and then I think maybe this is a little bit out of order, but let's just talk a little bit. We'll talk about benefits, but one of the main benefits is a 401k, which is for those of you who are not familiar with it, 401k is a retirement account that is set up by a company on behalf of their employees, whereby employees are able to contribute pre-tax dollars into a retirement account. And so it really is a means of allowing employees to save for their retirement on a pre-tax basis and allow their money to grow on a pre-tax basis until they're getting ready to retire. And as such, it represents to me, unless you're just a mom and pop company and you really can't afford it and it doesn't make sense and your employees maybe not be interested in retirement planning, but in most cases, people certainly are interested in retiring. And this is a very, very cheap and relatively easy to set up benefit that should be set up, or that can be set up to offer this benefit to your employees. And companies that offer it I think most companies offer it. Those companies that don't offer it, I think are at a disadvantage when it comes to hiring people and hiring and retaining people. And again, kind of, talking about employees being our most important asset, anything that we can do to allow more flexibility, give more benefits to our employees such that they feel valued, they feel like they are, that we're making an investment in them as they're making an investment in us, will go a long way. It's hard, I think it's hard to attract top talent without 401k. And especially if you're in a competitive hiring environment, a 401k is one of those critical things that's going to be asked. Do you offer a 401k? And if the answer is no, if the answer is yes, then obviously that helps. And if the answer is no, I think that can be really, really harmful to our efforts in hiring good people. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kate.
I was just going to jump in and say that I agree completely. I think one thing that, I don't know, I think we hear about it in the news media a lot is that Americans have such a hard time saving, and we see as people age, even as people age, we find, studies have found that a large number of people have very small to no savings, certainly insufficient savings. And I think part of the reason I think a lot of people struggle is they don't have access to vehicles that allow them to save. And I think a small business, you're talking about, Cirque was talking about how competitive the job environment is. I think what a 401k does, and I think people have different opinions about how effective it is, but if you are offering it, especially as a small business, I think you're kind of you're trying to set yourself apart from the other small businesses out there that are maybe competing for talent. And you're demonstrating to your employees that saving for the future is something that you value and that you want them to value. So I think it's it sends a really good message, in my opinion, to offer this kind of a benefit. And if you're able to afford it, to offer matching as well, because that also demonstrates that you feel invested in your employees saving for the future.
That's right, Caleb, and I didn't mention that. I didn't mention that yet, but you make a really, really good point. And the nice thing is about setting up a 401k along with any other kind of benefit package is that you can just kind of start small, right? You can start with a non-matching 401k offering some funds. I think you'll find that the actual cost of setting up a plan and administering the plan isn't that great. And as a small business, in the bullet point number 2 here is you can actually save a little bit on small business taxes, and that's true. But I would say that that's not the reason that you would do this. The reason that you do this is to offer employees a great benefit that either helps you stand out as an employer, or if you don't offer it, it makes you stand out as an employer that doesn't offer it. You can absolutely start with offering a 401k plan that does not offer a company matching contribution. Just allow the employees to set up how much they want to actually contribute on their behalf. And then, as the company grows and as the company prospers, then you can add small amounts of matching to it to make it even that much more rewarding to the employees.
I was just going to mention one more thing, and maybe you mentioned this, Cirque, but offering a 401k is not as daunting as it might seem. There are lots of really good organizations out there who can serve as custodians and administrators so that you don't have to do this yourself. Much like the payroll function, a 401k plan is something that you can do relatively inexpensively and work with an organization of your choosing to handle a lot of the compliance aspects of it. So it should not be kind of, I guess what I'm saying is, don't go into it with kind of the idea that it's going to cost you a lot of money. I mean, it's a relatively small investment with the potential, of all different kinds, whether it's from employee retention to saving for your own future. Mm-hmm. It's a well worth investment for a business.
Absolutely. Caleb, do you want to talk a little bit about the health benefits?
Yeah, sure thing. I don't think there's lots of things that we can say about health benefits, but I think the key thing is that the vast majority of people that have health insurance coverage in the US do get it through their employers. And I think the important thing to remember is that, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, or kind of alluded to, is that benefits are a big factor in how employees, or how recruits make decisions about where they're going to work. So not offering health and benefits really puts small businesses at a big disadvantage. So if, and now, unlike what I was just saying about 401k plans, health benefits can be expensive to offer, but the trade-off there is something that you really need to think seriously about, because it will be difficult, I think, to retain employees if you don't offer health insurance coverage. And I think one of the other things that is important about it is that it really does provide security for your employees once they're on board. If they know that they have health insurance through you, and it's something that you can help, even if you can help to pay, if you can help pay a portion of that premium, that's a benefit that people, when they know they have that, it's a really good retention tool for employees. So, you know, thinking purely about the cost of offering health benefits can, again, to go back to a phrase that Cirque used a little bit earlier, that can be a penny wise and a pound short kind of situation. Cirque, anything that on your mind about health benefits?
Yeah, I'll add one other thing, and kind of like, you know, with a 401k plan, you know, I think you'll find if you research just a little bit that there's lots of different types of plans available. If you are a company that's just kind of starting out and you don't have the resources to be able to offer a really fully comprehensive health plan to your employees and to your recruits, that's fine. You can start with a less full, I guess, program with maybe higher deductibles and a higher percentage of the premiums that are paid by employees and their family. The idea, though, is that, again, you can kind of, there's lots of different plans that you can choose from, right? There isn't like one rule that says that the company has to pay 80 or 90% of the premiums. You know, you can pick a plan that makes sense for not only your company but the types of employees that you have, right? For example, a software development company that is hiring a whole bunch of 25-year-old single healthy employees might want to offer a different type of plan or have different types of plans available than a company that is hiring older people, for example. And so just work with a professional to really think about what makes sense for your company, both from a what you're offering to your employees as well as the cost. I mean, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it and say that cost doesn't matter at all. I certainly know, and as a CFO, I will say that cost containment is very important. The idea is to make a good match between what you're offering and what that's going to cost both you and the employee, because the employee is going to have some cost as well to have the health insurance. And I think you work as a team with the service provider of your choosing to plan, design, and implement a plan that makes sense for you guys.
Great. Finally, we're going to talk about hiring a little bit. I love this first point. Don't rush to hire. I think most people have heard the I don't know if it's an old adage, but it's an adage nonetheless: hire slow and fire fast. And I think hiring is one of those things that I think when you have a growing business, the tendency might be to just get some warm bodies in the seats. But really, if you have a small business and it's growing, but you're also trying to manage team dynamics and you're trying to develop a culture of some kind, I think the hiring process needs to be very deliberate and methodical and slow. And as you say in point 2 there, really searching for the right people, and not just from a technical standpoint or a skill standpoint, but from a value standpoint. It's like, are the values of your business, are the things that are important to you as a business outside of just a profit motive, are those things also important to the people that are interested in working for you, or is there a disconnect there? And finally, point number 3, there is a compliance component to this, and so when you're going through that, it's really important that you stay on top of whatever compliance that may be a part of the hiring process. And that's just another key area that I think if you're trying to do it on a manual basis, or if you're trying to do it without any help, it can be a really difficult task. Sir, anything to add around hiring?
Yeah, I think this is such a critical part, and I appreciate your kind of saying one thing that I always say, which is to hire slowly and fire quickly. Hiring the right people obviously is critical. I think that goes without saying. You don't want to hire people that are too inexperienced. At the same time, you don't want to overhire and pay more money than needed for a specific task, depending on your needs. And so, finding the right person or the right people to hire, taking your time, making sure that making sure that there's a good fit to all the points that Caleb just mentioned is really, really critical. And the thing that I like to point out is I've seen too many times where a company has hired a person or people, and, relatively early on, they realize, oh, well, maybe this isn't working out exactly like I expected. I thought they might be able to, grow into the job, and it's just taking a little bit longer than we would have liked. They're not as productive as we kind of expected them to be, initially. And yet they still, because that it's such a painstaking effort to hire someone, and it's also once they're an employee, then there's then it's also not that easy to fire someone either, and so they end up hanging on to them for longer, right? And that causes all kinds of problems, right? That causes problems with productivity. That causes problems with stress of the people who did the hiring as well as the team members. If the new employee is not functioning properly or is not as productive as they should be, it creates lots of problems. And from an HR perspective, now we've got another problem or potential problem in that. As in most places, there is nothing that keeps someone from suing us, right? Suing us for, wrongful termination, suing us for discrimination, what have you, right? And so it's really, really painful. It's really, really costly. It's really, really time consuming, and it's risky if you hire the wrong person. Because there's just, for all the reasons that I mentioned. And so the hiring process should be well thought out. We should have some processes in place. We should really, really think about the job at hand and make sure that the job description is complete and thorough, and that we do everything that we can to make sure that the people who are hiring into these positions match and can meet the expectations of that job. Really, really critical. And then just one on the back end of the hiring process, I also want to point this out, and again, kind of leading to the importance of a well-functioning HR process or HR department or HR person or what have you. It's kind of, going back to now, not looking at it from a company perspective, but looking at it from the employee perspective or the recruit perspective. I don't know about your guys' experience, but I can tell you that I have been, I've been around the block a little bit, worked for many companies, and there are companies where I came in first day, everything was like they had a folder with the employee handbook. They had, all of the processes. They had all the forms that I needed to sign up for benefits and for payroll and withholdings and all that. And they had a laptop ready for me, at my workstation or my office, what have you. They had somebody there who's kind of guiding me through the process, introducing me to people on day one, and that really, really, really feels good as a first day employee, right? I've also been in situations where it's exactly the opposite, right? Where I've come in and they said, oh yeah, I forgot you were starting today. Let me give you a desk, and maybe you can use this laptop until we get you another one. And yeah, there's some forms that we need to dig up for you to sign. And that just gives you get this sense as a recruit that this company is not all together, they're not organized, they're not ready for me. And if this is the way that I'm being treated on day one, how's it going to be? And when it's supposed to be like, when they're supposed to be trying to impress me, how is it going to be, you know, a month, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months down the line? And so, you know, part of the hiring process is not only on the front end, but just making sure that you kind of think about the entire process through the hire, and getting, you know, someone up to speed with a company, and all the forms, and just making them comfortable on day one and thereafter. That's how you retain, that's one of the ways that you retain employees, through communication and your efforts on the HR process side.
Yeah, I would, if I can, I'll just jump in a little bit. And what you're describing in a word, Cirque, is onboarding, right? And I think, like you, I've had both experiences where on the first day that you show up, virtually everything that needs to be thought of has been thought of and is ready for you. And it is a really good feeling when you go, when you show up to work on your very first day, and it's like when you go to a hotel and you go to the desk and they say, yes, we've been expecting you. And that's such a nice feeling when they do that, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just the same thing as in a business, in a place where you hire people. That kind of welcome is just really appreciated, and people remember that stuff. And I can think about the experiences that are the exact opposite of that. And it's very similar to what you described, Cirque, where you're just like, oh, the person that your contact forgot that was your start date, and that you won't have a computer for a couple of days, and things like direct deposit aren't, the forms aren't ready for you. And so the onboarding process is something that I think growing businesses really need to take seriously, because it really does set the tone for each and every person's experience as an employee of your company.
Absolutely.
We have a question. So in terms of hiring, do you guys recommend background checks, asking the applicant for reference, calling the reference? What is the process for hiring that you would recommend here?
Go ahead, sir.
No, so yeah, so I highly recommend a background check. Just even just on the criminal side, just to make sure that there's no criminal record. And if there is, then obviously to the extent that you still want to hire that person, making sure that you understand it and have a discussion with them about that. So yes, I do recommend background checks. And as for references, I'd like to ask for a couple of references, even if you're not going to call them, just to see who they come up with, right? Is it like a manager of the previous employer, or is it somebody that they worked with 10 years ago, right? I think that probably gives some indication as to how confident they are about the people that they've been working with and what they're going to say about them. And so absolutely, this is again kind of goes back to the hire slowly, fire quickly. All the work should be done on the front end before actually making the decision to hire that person.
We have another question about 401k. So someone asked, the Call Savers Retirement Program may require small businesses to offer 401k by 2022. We're wondering if this legislation will create more options in the types of plans offered for small businesses.
Caleb, I don't know if you know anything about that. I don't.
It's the California legislation that they're offering about. Is that right?
Yeah, they say Call Savers Retirement Program.
Yeah, I am not that familiar with it. I think in general, though, I think I kind of alluded to this earlier, but there are pros and cons to 401ks. And I think there are a number of people that would like to see different retirement options out there. I think legislation, even though I know virtually nothing about it, I think some people would like to see expanded options when it comes to retirement. Whether or not that actually transpires, I don't know, but I do know it's something that a lot of people have been both in the business world and in government, they've been trying to expand the kind of retirement options available.
Thank you, and let's continue. We did launch a third poll, if you can help us answer the questions.
So when I look at this question, Cirque, I think what I think of is if you can find a CPA who isn't afraid of words, or if you can find an attorney that's not afraid of numbers, you'll probably be in good shape. Is that fair?
Yes, that is fair, yes. Yeah, I think there are obviously people that are trained in HR. If you get to the point where where HR function is critical enough, and you've got the resources to be hiring people internally that are experts in HR, that's the way to go. Otherwise, you're going to probably use a combination of resources, right? An attorney, I don't know unless they're really steeped in HR issues or compliance issues, would be good. Obviously, they tend to be pretty expensive. To use. I don't know of that many companies that use attorneys, as their main HR function. CPA kind of similar. I mean, like Caleb said, if you can find a CPA, with some experience in HR, or maybe they've done multiple hats at other companies and have done some of that kind of work in the past. I think that makes sense. If they're good at putting together processes, that would be good. But I think for the most part, you're going to be you're going to be using outside resources, consultants. As well as hopefully having some people internally or some person internally who can take on some of these roles.
Okay, so we're going to talk about a few ways to kind of get started if you're starting from scratch, or if you kind of have some HR pieces together, maybe some suggestions that you hadn't considered before. And the first thing I think, especially if you're starting from scratch, is to take an HR fitness test. And what I mean by a HR fitness test is just kind of a self-assessment. So look at your business and kind of look at what you have in terms of an HR functionality, and just figure out where you stand. And then based on that self-assessment, you can kind of decide, okay, where are the gaps and where do we need to fill things? How do we go about filling those gaps? So, and you might, as Cirque suggested, you might need some outside help to kind of, to perform this assessment, but you'll want to maybe examine, how you handle hiring and termination and those kinds of things, leave and benefit laws, other compliance issues, wage and hour issues. Like if you're subject to those kinds of things, and you have you have some kind of functionality around them, working with someone to determine how effective those are and whether or not there's any gaps that need to be filled is a good sense of is a really good place to start. Second on this list is sprucing up your employee handbook, and that obviously assumes that you have an employee handbook, but an employee handbook is a really good thing to work on and review and update regularly for two key reasons. Number one, the hiring and onboarding process I'm mentioning those together actually, but hiring and onboarding, when you're bringing somebody on board and having an employee handbook, the content is really going to lay out everything that new employee is going to need to know. So everything about your company, its employees, how they handle pay and performance and benefits and all the relevant policies that you're going to need. And you can do a fairly simple employee handbook that can cover all of those issues. And if you have a more complex business, then it might necessitate a slightly more robust employee handbook. But what it does is it gives employees confidence about a resource that they can use to know everything that they need to know about being an employee there. And I think what it also does is it shows that as an employer, you are engaged and you are invested in educating them and keeping them informed as possible about those things. And as I mentioned earlier, reviewing it regularly and updating it, if you haven't done so in a little while, is a good way to make sure everything is staying current. Third, getting familiar with your relevant state labor laws. So there's obviously all kinds of jurisdictions when it comes to employment. So making sure you're current on those things. Labor law is kind of like the tax law. There's several different, or not even several. There's many different jurisdictions. They all have different rules, and so it can be a lot to keep up with. But if you are subject, if you have employees in several different states, it can be become a pretty critical task to manage and stay compliant on. And finally, tracking some metrics, things like cost per hire, employee absentee rates, cost of overtime. There's lots of different ways that you can, that the HR function, it does generate financial information that you can use to examine the efficiency of how things are running, and you can identify if there's inefficiencies. So those kinds of simple calculations can actually tell you quite a lot of interesting things about how the people in your business, the data that they generate just by merely being employees of your business, how things are running along. Sirk, anything to add on these suggestions?
No, great suggestions. Just from experience, I will tell you that as far as employee handbooks are concerned, that's usually kind of this. I get the big sigh, from clients that I'm working with when I mentioned the employee handbook. Many companies, it can be very, very simple, easy, relatively short. To get started, and that's kind of what I would recommend to get started with. But as you hire employees, even things like not understanding like the purchase process, right? Who can purchase things at what level, and what do you need to do to get reimbursed? Things like that, right? What is our pay time off process, and how do we record that and track that? Just simple things like that. Having it down on paper. That you distribute, where the employee actually gets a copy of it, signs it, and makes a copy, so that you've got a signed copy of it, that they understand what's expected of them and kind of what the processes are, is really, really important. I find that many clients kind of forego this step because they find it to be cumbersome, and I would encourage you to at least look at it and see what can be done with minimal level to start, and then add on as needed. Because this is something that, ultimately, if there's ever any problems, then you will be able to go back to it, and employees will be able to go back to it and say, hey, listen, these were the rules as I understood it, or these are the rules that we understood, we communicated to you as the employee, and that will resolve, issues in the future. I think we just had one final poll here. Just wanted to get your thoughts on HR, our tech tools. But I think that was pretty much the presentation, right? Do you have anything else that you wanted to add, Caleb, or should we open it up for questions?
I don't think so. I think we're ready to field some questions if we have any.
Recognize we didn't need too much time.
Yeah, we don't have too much time, but just overall, a lot of questions on what Gusto provides. So, Caleb, I'll be sending out an email later today with your email address so they can ask you more direct questions.
That would be great.
Yes, and we have a question about 401k. How does it compare with IRA?
Okay, so I can help you with that. So A 401k is a company-sponsored program, whereas an IRA is an individual, individually, I guess, financed program. With a 401k, it tends to be richer. For example, I think right now for 2019, the maximum amount that an employee can contribute to a qualified 401k plan that's sponsored by a company, by your employer, is $19,000 per year. Right, and that's for people who are under 50 years old. If you're 50 or over, you actually there's even an opportunity for you to increase that by $6,000, so that you can actually contribute up to $25,000 of your pre-tax money going towards the 401k plan. The IRA, I don't remember exactly what the amounts were, but it's a lot smaller than that. And then there's also kind of restrictions in terms of who can contribute to IRAs and how much, depending on your income level. Whereas the 401k, there are no such restrictions, and you can contribute as much, per those guidelines that I just mentioned. And I think in most cases, if you have the option of both a 401k or an IRA, most people will go with a 401k.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that is because an IRA is self-directed, the obvious advantage to a 401k is that it's through an employer and you have the potential for matching. So even if your employer doesn't match your contributions now, they may match them in the future. In an IRA, there's really that's not possible because it's self-directed.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I was just going to give a little bit more color to is the IRAs your contributions to an IRA are tax deductible, but they are subject to limitations. So
right.
If you make too much money, and as Sirk mentioned, the maximum is much, much lower than the contribution maximums on 401ks.
Now, I'll just on the flip side of that, there is one advantage to IRAs versus a 401k plan in that the investment vehicles that you have in a typical IRA is much greater, right? You can invest in individual stocks, mutual funds of your choice, what have you. 401k plans are usually limited to a group of funds, mutual funds. And you kind of pick and choose amongst those and decide what percentage of your contribution you want to invest in certain types of funds. But most 401k plans, I don't know if any 401k plans offer you the ability to invest in individual stocks, for example.
Caleb, does Gusto works with nonprofits?
We do, yeah. We have a fair number of nonprofit businesses as customers.
Perfect. I think our time is up. Just a small reminder, we will be sharing the recordings and the pitch deck for this presentation later today with the information to contact Caleb about any questions regarding Gusto. And I will also include Sirk's email address in case you have any financial questions to ask him. Thank you both, Sirk and Caleb, for presenting today. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Caleb. And thank you all for again, taking time out of your busy schedules to spend an hour with us.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you, Sirk. Thank you, Patty.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.